Welcome everyone who's joining us. We'll just give it another minute or so as people are logging in, but we welcome all of you tonight and we'll get started shortly. Good evening, everyone. It's about 5:31, so we'll go ahead and get started. There may be a few people still working to log in, but I would like to welcome you to our Timely Topics webinar titled Campaign for Kings Ridge, the Solution to Homelessness is Housing. I'm Cheryl Tung, and I serve as president of the League of Women Voters of Wake County, and I'm so glad that you all could join us on this rainy evening for what is sure to be an interesting and informative presentation about a topic that has become even more important with the continued rise in housing costs. Before we begin, I want to briefly remind everyone how we are using the Zoom platform this evening. I'd like to ask if everyone could please mute themselves and turn off your cameras during the presentation portion of this program. For questions, we will be using the chat feature. If you have a question during the presentation, please type the word question or place a question mark into the chat box followed by your question. This will make it much easier for our moderator, Heather Dennis, to see and collect the questions throughout the presentation. At the end of the presentation, the speaker will be asked your questions. We'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can, and please don't wait until the end of the presentation to submit your questions. Heather Dennis, our Timely Topics Committee co-chair, will monitor the questions submitted and serve as our moderator for the Q&A segment. This webinar is being recorded and in the next few days will appear on LWV Wake's YouTube channel. And before we get started, I have just a few announcements regarding upcoming League activities and events. On February 8th, our DEI committee will host its monthly roundtable discussion titled What's Up with Pronouns? There will be some pre-discussion resources, including articles and a short video that would be helpful to read and view prior to this discussion. And the resources and registration links can be found on the website event page. And this event will also be held via Zoom. And our Western Wake Leaguelet will meet virtually on February 15th to discuss The Sum of Us. And a detailed description about the book and registration links are also available on our website. And last, for our February Timely Topics, we are excited to welcome Brad Young, who is the Executive Director of the NC Institute for Political Leadership. The North Carolina Institute of Political Leadership is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization committed to improving the practice of democracy. Their leadership training programs help to prepare people from diverse backgrounds to be public servants, elected, appointed, or through community involvement. And I'll just add that two noteworthy graduates are Secretary of State Elaine Marshall and State Treasurer Dale Falwell, who, spoiler alert, will be our March guest speaker for Timely Topics. I'm really looking forward to this discussion, and I hope you all will share this information with your friends. And you can find out more information about all of our activities and events at lwvwake.org. And if you're not already a member, we invite you to join us, and you can join online at our website. Now I'd like to turn the program over to our other Timely Topics committee co-chair, Cheryl Keaton, who will introduce tonight's guest speakers.
Thank you, Cheryl. We're fortunate today to have two individuals who have a wealth of knowledge and experience about bringing affordable housing to homeless individuals and those about to be homeless. Missy Hadley is the Senior Director of Resource Development at CASA, a nonprofit whose mission is to provide access to affordable housing. Prior to working for CASA, Missy was a fundraiser for the 180 Place, a homeless shelter, soup kitchen, and health clinic in Charleston, South Carolina. She also worked for Habitat for Humanity of Wake County before taking the position at CASA. Missy has a master's degree in English from UNC Wilmington and a bachelor's degree from NC State University. Also today with us is Fraley Marshall. Fraley has worked for nonprofits for most of her career. These include the arts, the Chamber of Commerce, politics, faith entities, and community-based initiatives. Her focus this past decade has been on people who are struggling with systemic injustices and building relationships with those who are working to eliminate those injustices. We look forward to hearing from both our speakers. Missy will be joining us via video connection, and Fraley will be connected via audio. Let's start by welcoming Fraley Marshall. Good evening, Fraley. Are you on the line?
Good evening, Cheryl. Yes, I'm here. Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, we appreciate you having us on so much this evening. Missy and I are super passionate about sharing a little bit about Kings Ridge, and we know that many of you on this call have been involved in issues of homelessness and working with organizations and people who have been supporting these efforts. So we appreciate the chance to share a little bit about Kings Ridge, and Missy is going to share the bulk of the nuts and bolts of the story, but I wanted to just tell you a little bit about my personal story and how I got involved. And it began when my kids were attending Broughton High School. I came along the social worker there who was supporting over 200 kids on any given day with extended needs. And those kids had families behind them. So she needed extra support to work with those families. And pretty quickly, we got paired up with a mom who had been living in a budget motel with her 3 teenagers for over 3 years. And she is an incredible woman, a super hard worker, and just all she wanted to do was support her kids. But she had an eviction on her record, and it had proved very out of the motel, just to live in that motel with her teenagers, but just couldn't get out of it because of that eviction record. So we came alongside her, a group of parents at Broughton, and built what some of you may be familiar with. It's something called the Catholic Charity Support Circle around her. And we had a team of 6 to 8 individuals that just walked with she and her family for the year and just supported them in budgeting and job searching and mentoring and looking for housing. And looking for housing, we realized, was absolutely the most critical challenge that this family faced, and one of the most important ones. And it did end up finding housing for her, but even today, 3 years later, the stability of that is remaining a challenge. At the same time I was doing this, 5 or so of my friends had been spending time with women at the Women's Center, and that is a traditional day shelter. And they had been building really deep relationships with the women there and had realized that the exact same challenge was a problem. There were women sleeping out back, 30 women any given night. Or there were women that would be housed and spending their whole paycheck on rent who couldn't stay housed, or women that would get a voucher but couldn't find housing with that voucher. So we decided to come together and spend the year just educating ourselves on all of the great work that was being done to help people who are experiencing homelessness in our community. And we met with organizations and churches and people and the county, anyone that was doing work that would be willing to speak with us. And we learned that there really was a lot of great work being done, but there was a need for something called permanent supportive housing on a large scale. And during this education tour we were doing, CASA was generous enough to meet with us. And it turned out that they had been dreaming as well. We began dreaming about what could be done, and they had been dreaming. And they had just bought 6 acres of land right near Wake Med. And they invited us to come alongside them in a journey to build this permanent supportive housing dream. And that's when Kings Ridge was born. So CASA is an incredible organization. For those of you who are not familiar with them, they have been building low-income housing and property managing it for over 29 years in our community. And they are a chosen partner of the county to provide housing. And this is an enormous dream for them. They have over 460 units already that they have been working with, but this is going to be one of their largest ones. So with that, we are thrilled to have been invited along just to dream with them. My role, I play a role on the committee to connect with faith entities and share the story. And we have incredible leadership from Missy Hatley and the team.
Fraley, right here at the end, I think we are losing your connection.
To guide us in this whole process. So I'm going to turn it over to Missy and let her share the specifics about Kings Ridge. Can you hear me okay? Because all I see.
So, hello everyone. I'm so glad to be here and talk with all of you. And I hope everybody's hearing the same thing I did. I feel like we heard everything but the last 45 seconds of Fraley's talk. So I think you understood most of what she said, and hopefully everybody can hear me. Can somebody give me a thumbs up if I sound okay?
Missy, you sound great.
Okay,
You sound great.
Okay, thanks. And I so appreciate Fraley being on and all the work that she's done for the past 2 years to help us get to this point with the campaign for Kings Ridge. And I do have a few slides to share with answering some of the most frequently asked questions about Kings Ridge. And then I want to leave time to answer questions because you have a great turnout tonight. And I know people are coming from a variety of backgrounds and want to make sure we get to your specific questions. I'm also really excited to introduce someone who is going to be an extremely important person at Kings Ridge, and that is our director. It's her 3rd day, and she is joining us tonight. Her name is Erin Yates, and I don't want to put her on the spot too much on her 3rd day, but Erin, if you can hear me and want to just say hello, you can.
Hello. I'm really excited to be on board. I've had the opportunity to do a little bit of this work in the past, and this is right up my alley with where my heart lies. So I'm really excited to be on board. I'm learning a lot about the community, and I look forward to working with all of y'all going forward. Thanks, Missy.
Thanks, Erin. And thanks for joining us. So Erin has worked in permanent supportive housing in South Carolina, Virginia, and now back home for her in North Carolina. So we're really excited to have her on board for 3 days. So as Fraley said, CASA is a local nonprofit that was created in Raleigh, and we're also in Durham and Chapel Hill now. We were created 30 years ago to provide affordable apartments for people with mental health disabilities. So there were a group of volunteers from Wake County Human Services that wanted to provide housing for people who were living on the streets so that their healthcare interventions would be more effective. And so those were our beginnings, and CASA started with just a handful of apartments and over the years has grown to 460 across the triangle. And about 260 of those are in Wake County, primarily inside the Beltline in Raleigh, and walkable to a bus stop. So the Kings Ridge vision, I think I missed a slide, 1 second. No, I didn't. The Kings Ridge vision, as Fraley said, is something that CASA had wanted to do for many years. And it was heightened when we lost our longtime CEO, who some of you may have known, Debra King. Debra was CASA CEO for 23 years and was extremely a dedicated advocate for people who are on the outside of society trying to look in and to get people out of housing, and really believed that everybody needed to call their own. And losing her was a big loss, not just for CASA, but for our community. And so the board and the staff and many of our volunteers wanted to do something to name it in her honor. And that's why it's going to be called Kings Ridge. And we wanted to reach big and dream big, like she had always done. And so we wanted to build a community much larger than we've ever been able to build, and to focus 100% on ending homelessness in the community. That is really hard to do, even for a nonprofit like us whose mission is to do that. Housing is expensive, land and renovations are expensive. And as I'm sure you all know, the numbers have to work. In order to be an effective landlord, an effective property manager, we have to know that we can take care of the buildings for decades. And so in order to make the numbers work, oftentimes you have to build much fewer units, like say 10 units, or you have to serve a higher income range to bring in higher rents to pay the bills, the debt. And so we've made concessions here and there, built smaller units, built it out in phases. And the opportunity at Kings Ridge was to do a public-private partnership and ask the community to help us along with the city and the county so that we could build 100 apartments and we could focus all of them on ending homelessness. And the slide I'm showing here is demonstrating in affordable housing, it's relative. We need affordable housing all across the spectrum, way higher even than this chart shows. But where we focus at CASA is in the 30 to 50% of the area median income range. And this is the range for Wake County. So in Wake County, it's virtually impossible to qualify for an apartment if you're earning minimum wage or even a little above minimum wage. So a lot of people are paying far more than 30% of their income for their rent, which leaves them extremely vulnerable to eviction and homelessness. And back to Fraley's story about the woman that she worked with, whose kids were with hers at Broughton. Once you have been evicted, that is a barrier that takes years to overcome. And if you have an eviction on your record in a market like ours, it's extremely difficult to rent an apartment again. So people, again, are stuck on the outside trying to get back in. So this is the range that we serve at CASA, and at Kings Ridge, we're focusing on ending homelessness and the 30% income range, which again is, there are virtually no other new construction efforts that are going to serve the 30% right now in Raleigh. This shows a map of the location of the land. It's 6 acres, and right now it's a wooded lot. CASA owns and manages 88 apartments in walking distance of this. So this is a community that we are already part of. And there's a high-use bus stop right across the street. So really accessible to schools, a post office, the Capitol or the Newbern Avenue shopping corridor is close by. So it's a really great location for someone. 70 of the apartments are going to serve single adults with a focus on ending chronic homelessness for people who've been homeless for several years or repeated homelessness over several years. And 30 of the units will be 2 and 3 bedrooms for families with children. So we want to make an impact for both families with children, which may be a temporary homelessness situation, and also for people who are living with disabilities on the streets for whom this might be their permanent home. With 100 units and the ability to serve, depending on the size of the families, maybe 200 residents, Kings Ridge can end homelessness for 10% of those who were on our last homeless count in Wake County. So in addition to the apartments that we are building, Kings Ridge is going to be access to supportive services right in the building. So right now, CASA's apartments are from a duplex to a quad to 10, and I think our largest community in Raleigh has 32 apartments. And for people who need supportive services, who live with disabilities and need access to healthcare supports and other supports, they are taking the bus. Very few of our residents have cars. And so they're going all over to piece together their services. And for some people that works okay, that they're doing very well and that works. But especially for people who are just recently coming out of the trauma of homelessness and live with disabilities, making it work with those supportive services can be really difficult. The services are there, but access to them and transportation and the management of it all is extremely complex. And so in order to be more effective at ending homelessness, we're going to build supportive service space in the bottom of the community on the first floor and have both CASA staff and also partnership staff there that will provide behavioral health services, health clinic hours in partnership with Wake Med, peer counseling, places for students to do homework, and a variety of things that will help the residents maintain their stable housing and move toward whatever goals it is that they have for their lives. Some of the key components to this community and why it's possible, again, is the public-private model. We have been fortunate to receive funding from the city and the county for housing in the past. However, those funds have been limited to where we either had to build very few units or again, do some kind of hybrid where we weren't able to focus 100% on ending homelessness there. So of course, this year in the city of Raleigh, we had a housing bond that passed with flying colors, and that gave the city a much larger bucket than they've had in the past. But when we launched this campaign, we had no idea that the housing bond would be on the ballot, when it would be on the ballot, or if it would pass. So that was a fortunate bucket of money that became available after we launched the campaign, but without the community, we would never have gotten that far. And, you know, we talk a lot about the impact of permanent supportive housing and really focusing on the people who've been homeless the longest, who are most likely to die on the streets, who have virtually no other pathway to housing than to have this opportunity. And some of the places that have done this and some of the impacts that they have seen, More Place in Charlotte, which we've all visited as CASA staff and members of the committee, opened about 10 years ago to end chronic homelessness in Charlotte. And that's what the book 100 Story Home was written about. Kathy Izard wrote that book and has been a mentor to our committee. And at More Place in Charlotte, they had a partnership with UNC Charlotte from the beginning to measure impacts. And they compared the ER visits of actual residents in the building for 2 years prior to moving in when they were chronically homeless, and the 2 years after they moved in at More Place. And in those 2 years, it saved Mecklenburg County $2.4 million in taxpayer expenses for healthcare. In Denver, there are many permanent supportive housing models, and their studies have taken not just the healthcare, not just the healthcare, but other public costs of homelessness, such as costs to the criminal justice system, many times for crimes related to being homeless, such as loitering and other crimes that are nonviolent crimes related to having nowhere else to go. But taking all that into account, the housing that they created in Denver saved almost $16,000 a year per person, which offset the cost of the housing to the city of Denver. And then I have a bullet here about the improved outcomes for children, but we're really excited to be able to include family housing at Kings Ridge because we know that children who experience homelessness are more likely to experience homelessness as an adult, and we want to have this opportunity to break the cycle of housing instability and make a difference for families and future generations. So as I mentioned, Kings Ridge will be a permanent home for many of its residents. If someone is living on the streets with mental health disabilities or other chronic health conditions and is going to be living on disability alone, not able to work outside of that, their income's not going to change. And Kings Ridge, we need to be prepared for them to age in place and for it to be their permanent home. And most of CASA's vacancies today in the apartments we already have come when the resident passes away. For that reason, that our market really doesn't have other affordable options for our residents. And so we are in it for the long haul with many of our residents. And also, some Kings Ridge residents, this will be a stepping stone. So there are families living in motels who have income and may even have 2 working parents in some cases, and they're paying the motel because they can't stay there if they don't, so they're paying the motel oftentimes far more than an affordable rent would cost because of the other barriers like qualifying with your credit and earning 3 times the rent. So for families in those situations and for some other folks who are going to be able to pay down debts and increase their income potential, then Kings Ridge will be a stepping stone back into the conventional housing market. And we love it when that happens, and we'll see that happen a lot, but I want to be honest that that's not going to be the case for everyone. The housing market doesn't have a next step for everybody that will be there. So I only have a couple more slides left and then we can move to questions, but I wanted to share what we've accomplished so far. We launched the campaign in 2020 after a feasibility study, and we started raising money in the community. And then as of November, we raised $7 million from individuals, corporations, and communities of faith. Most people make 3-year pledges, but the total of that was $7 million. And then the city of Raleigh awarded us $8.4 million for Kings Ridge, and the majority of that came through the housing bond. So I'm sure you followed it closely, I would imagine, and you might remember that there was a lot of advocacy in the housing bond promotions to hold the city accountable for including 30% AMI income in the housing bond, because homeless advocates were concerned that we could do affordable housing and it would be needed affordable housing, but it might not reach down to those who are homeless. And so the city did earmark this bucket of money to make sure that it was ending homelessness. And we were very glad to be able to have that timing work out where we could apply and be given this award. And then Wake County gave $4 million. So we call that phase 1 of the campaign, and it ensures that we're building the building. We actually did soil borings earlier this week, and we have our architects with Jay Davis and are going to the city for site review soon. So that's phase 1, and just a ton of love and advocacy and passion and commitment from the community made that possible. And then moving forward, right now we're still fundraising because we're in what we're calling phase 2. And we all along have been made aware by many other people and followed it ourselves that the costs of construction has skyrocketed since we did our first estimates, and that the building materials and labor continues to be volatile. So while we have priced out our plans most recently in September of last year, and we believe that we have what we need, we are keeping an eye on those costs and recognize that we may need some additional capital dollars for construction. So that is one continued area of fundraising. And we're also working on furnishing the building. With 100 homes, there's a lot of furniture that needs to be moved in. And we'd really like to be able to provide some fixed pieces for the families and individuals that are moving in, because we know now most people moving into CASA apartments from homelessness are bringing, just a couple of trash bags with their belongings and are starting from scratch. And so we want to be able to furnish the building. We're also fundraising for first year or first 2-year operating costs. And we have an endowment set up with the goal to put in $2 million that will help with ongoing operational costs for the duration of the community for generations. So that is where we are right now. And I look forward to answering your questions. We do have a website, a specific area of Kings Ridge, about Kings Ridge on the CASA website. So you can find videos and an FAQ list there and some additional information, but I'm also happy to answer questions.
Hi, Missy, it's Heather. I'm waiting for some folks to put some more questions for me in the chat, but I did have one. And I know you mentioned you were going to focus on some supportive services and wraparound services and have space. Do you have any collaborations currently with other nonprofits in the area or other service providers you can speak to?
Sure. So we have a lot of partners in our housing right now. So over the years, as we have built a building or purchased and renovated a building, we might partner with somebody just for that community. We have for example, we have a veterans community on Sunnybrook Road, which is really close to where Kings Ridge will be. And the VA Medical Center is our partner there. They have veterans case managers that can link veterans to many resources for job training and healthcare and other benefits. So we have a few different partners. At Kings Ridge specifically, the primary partners we have so far that will be in the building with us are Wake Med and Alliance Health. So Alliance is the managed care provider and is a partner to us and for many, serves many of the residents in CASA housing today. And so we have a long history of partnering with them. And so Alliance will manage the contract for the case managers in the building. So there'll be 5 to 6 case managers in the building that work there full time with Aaron, our director, and the other CASA staff. And that will also include peer specialists and benefits counselors as well, because the community will open up the Medicaid transformation place and just making sure that everybody, sometimes one of the good things about being flexible is that people can move in without having to wait 3 years to get all their paperwork together. And so that means that people may sometimes come in with no benefits at all, even though they're entitled to those. So it can take some time to get that together, and it's nice to have help with that.
Well, when I am not moderating these question and answers in my real life, I'm the executive director for Dress for Success Triangle. So we should definitely talk because our work seems like it would coincide there.
Yes,
I'm not wearing that hat now. So
well, my mother is Beth Briggs. So
proving it's a very small world. You're familiar
exactly
with what we do and why it's a good match. So
you can ask Missy. It's a bit of a joke. I have a running list of who all I'm going to start begging real soon. And y'all.
Well, add me if I'm not on it already, which knowing Beth, I am. Get that done.
100%.
Well, while I have been wearing my other hat, we did get some other questions in the chat. So someone asked, other than Kings Ridge, are there similar developments in the work?
So for CASA, we actually have 3 communities in development right now, but Kings Ridge is the only one that's in Raleigh. We're building 48 apartments in Chapel Hill, Carborough. It's actually half of it's in Chapel Hill, half of it's in Carborough. And then we're also going to be building 16 apartments to end homelessness in Durham. We would love to be building more in Raleigh. We would love to purchase properties that can be remodeled. And we're always looking for those opportunities. When the 6 acres that we bought for Kings Ridge came online, we had to make a very strong offer, market rate offer, because there are cash, competitive market that are just going to scoop things up. And so nonprofits have to be competitive. And, honestly, the ability to do this community this way and to make this big of an impact in homelessness goes back so many years of how hard CASA's board and staff work to put aside, to scrounge aside enough capital to make that purchase possible. So it's just been a lot of really well-intentioned people doing hard work for many years. I'm not including myself in that, but many other people that have put this together. So CASA will continue to grow. And like I said, we want to buy more land and buildings in Raleigh. I don't know that we'll be able to do 100 apartments to end homelessness again very quickly, but we are very hopeful that Kings Ridge will demonstrate the investment that providing a home for someone instead of managing their homelessness, the difference that that can make, and have those returns on investment that, you know, Denver and others have seen, and that we'll continue to see the city and the county designate dollars for permanent supportive housing, and that we can do it again. But that would be our goal.
Well, that is a wonderful segue to the next question that's in the chat is, are you guys planning to keep statistics similar to those you mentioned in Charlotte and Denver, or are there other things that you're going to be tracking?
Yes, and the partners and the logistics of how that will all work is not set in stone yet, but things like that are one of the reasons why we brought Aaron on now, even though we're just starting construction and it's going to be some time before we open, because we want to have that plan in place and many other partnerships and plans in place long before the doors open, because it's so important to be able to demonstrate the impact. And one of our capital campaign committee members is Dr. Brian Klausner with Wake Med, who works in population health and works in the downtown clinic that services the homeless population living around downtown. And he's been involved in a lot of familiar face, they call it familiar faces, people that are homeless and show up in the healthcare system, really unable to make as big of an impact as they could if they had somewhere to be, in a refrigerator and a bed to sleep in. And so he's already been tracking a lot of health outcomes and is, you know, really interested in helping us put together a good plan for that.
That's great. Now, and this is a question from someone else. Will Wake Med provide primary care to the residents? I know you were talking a little bit about Alliance and the case management piece, but.
So again, I think all of the logistics are kind of yet to be determined. Once we know exactly who's going to be living in the building, you know, Aaron will be, and the team will be putting together tenant selection plans and kind of working with people a few weeks ahead of moving in, maybe even a few months. And once we know the population, we'll find the best medical home for them. And so we wouldn't automatically switch people over to a primary system at Wake Med. We would want people to continue, if they have a healthcare partners, we want them to continue those relationships. But the clinic would be open to anyone who lives in the building to at least be a point. So I can't say it would become everybody's primary care home, but it would be something everybody has access to. It just might be that first link to behavioral or primary or specialty care.
Great. Kind of switching gears here a little bit, question around the education supports. How are education support, you mentioned, provided for children? And then I think a related question is, have you had any conversations with Wake Tech around adult ed or training?
So not yet, but those are all great ideas. We have talked to the Y, and the Walnut Creek Elementary is not right now. It's not the designated elementary school for Kings Ridge, but it's so close. It's the getting to that Y would be very easy to do with van transportation, and the Y is very eager to make sure the kids at Kings Ridge are linked in with those nearby community resources. So we'll have things to do in the building, but we want to make sure we have a community in the building, but we're also linking everybody there to our wonderful Raleigh community outside the building. So we've talked to the Y, we've talked to some other folks that have resources. We haven't put all that together yet.
Linda has offered to, she says, happy to help you check out Partnership Village in Greensboro. So I'm intuiting from that they do something similar.
Yeah, we would love to learn about Partnership Village.
And Cheryl here has a question around how do you find the construction companies to help with the remodeling? I guess what's the process around vetting those folks?
So typically, when we're building new or remodeling, we typically have federal or local funding, and so we go through a bid process. A formal we put out a formal RFP and have an internal team that follows the bid process for considering, like, the general contractor, for example. And I don't know if this is what the question was referring to, but sometimes people want to know, like, if people can donate building materials, and they certainly can. And with Kings Ridge specifically, some of the really wonderful philanthropists in town. So Baker Roofing has offered to cover the cost of the roof. Wake Stone Corporation has committed to providing all the gravel that goes in the foundation of the building. And so there's already people who committed that. But for the architect and the general contractor and all the big pieces, that's a bid process, and they're not donating their time because we've got to deliver it on time and on budget.
So this is a follow-up question for me, and I see Pat's hands up, so I'm going to go to her next. But with any of the funding that you get from the municipal sources, do you have kind of regulations and rules that follow from that? I mean, specific to this area that you can't, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have, lots of, we have an audit, of course, and we have lots of compliance with Wake County and the city of Raleigh and Durham, and everywhere we are, and then HUD also, because we have some HUD funding. So we actually don't have any HUD funding in Kings Ridge, which, if there had been an opportunity to apply, we would have, but they're just, again, when you start looking at that many units serving the 30% AMI, there aren't a lot of affordable housing programs that fund that.
Pat, I'm going to turn it over to you for your question.
Well, Missy's been too polite to say this, but it's been implied. They need money, folks. And there are some of us on this call who have already contributed, and I invite the rest of you to join us. casanc.org/Kingridge.
Thank you, Pat. And I recognize your name, and I know that you are not just a Kings Ridge supporter, but a CASA donor from way back. So thank you so much for saying that.
That was again, my nonprofit route showing those are the best kind of comments to get for doing one of these presentations.
Mm-hmm.
I've reached the end of the questions in the chat. If anybody has a burning question, now is the time to put it in there. While we're waiting for that, Missy or Aaron or whoever, if there's anything you've thought of that you wish we would have asked that we didn't, so you can talk about, now's a great time.
Well, I think if I had like closing remarks, because I know I talked quickly and I covered a lot, but I think really what we want people to understand about Kings Ridge and about permanent supportive housing is that we have a major housing crisis that is going to get much, much worse. But there is something that we can do that can reach even the most likely to die on the street folks. That right now, last year, 91% of all CASA residents completed at least a year of housing, and they're paying 30% of their income for rent, and they're doing very well living independently and maintaining their housing. And so, permanent supportive housing has been a proven strategy that we can spend less than what it costs for shelters and jail stays and other costs to the community, actually providing what is the kinder approach that is also a sustainable long-term approach to ending homelessness. And that what you see in other cities, in LA and Seattle, what you see there is coming here. And we have to find ways to demonstrate how we can use the community resources we have to mitigate that crisis.
That is great information. This is not my area of expertise by any stretch of the imagination, but I would assume the combination of skyrocketing rent increases, housing cost, and the expiration of some of the safety net that was put in place through COVID is also going to have a exponentially negative impact on some of this as well. So there's likely to be folks that find themselves at risk of homelessness or being unhomed that haven't experienced that in the past. So I assume y'all been around a long time. Are there things you guys are doing more globally than just Kings Ridge to sort of prepare for that?
Well, we've definitely, over the past couple of years, stepped in ways we never had before for our residents to make sure that they could get their pharmacy medications when all the other support systems were kind of fractured, and helping people with rent, which typically our residents are responsible for 30% of their rent through whatever income they have, whether it's a housing voucher or their employment or their disability income. And we just wanted people to stay housed. We didn't want anyone to become homeless during COVID. And so we stepped in, and luckily the United Way and some other groups kind of did some fundraising pools just for organizations with residents in that situation. So everything about the last 2 years has been atypical. Right now, I would say we only have about 30 households out of 460 that are still kind of off track in terms of paying rent. And I think that's remarkable, honestly. The average income of all of our residents last year was under 15,000. So they're making it work.
Right. In very challenging environments. Yeah. Judy has asked the question, are there other projects that you're aware of, like the Friends that Fraley mentioned, in various areas around the county? I'm not sure. Country. So I guess basically, are there other projects similar that you're aware of?
So there are a lot of times circles that kind of help people who have rent needs, like to keep them from being homelessness, like to prevent that. I've heard of that. But what Fraley and other members of our capital campaign committee, and Molly Painter is our chair, what they have done for this campaign, I'm not aware of any other groups that have made this kind of impact.
Yeah, it's a great thing that is out there. Well, I will give one last call for questions in the chat, because I know somebody's out there thinking, oh, well, don't I? But I do, in the meantime, want to say thank you to you all for coming out and sharing all this great information with us. And again, very selfishly, personal connections being made. So that is fantastic. I think you guys are doing fabulous work, and we appreciate you sharing that with us. And hopefully, as we progress through phase 2 and get close to that actual ribbon cutting, we're able to come back together and get some more updates. No other questions have come in. So unless anybody complains, I think it's okay that we ourselves 12 extra minutes tonight. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of kudos in the chat, and thank you for great presentation. So I will end by thanking all of our attendees for coming and putting in such great questions. We appreciate the good turnout. It's not pretty weather, but we appreciate you spending an hour of your time with us. I do want to reiterate, as Cheryl said earlier, our next Timely Topics presentation is February 17th at 5:30. That will also be via Zoom, and it will be with Brad Young, who is the Executive Director of the North Carolina Institute of Political Leadership. And in March, we will hear from one of the alumni of that group, the North Carolina State Treasurer Dale Falwell. It's scheduled for March 24th, but we're still determining if that's going to be in person or virtual as we see how all of this shakes out. So stay tuned for details on that. But thank you all again for coming out, and we will see you guys next February. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.